In Washington, the White House is warning Russia about invading Ukraine, and at the Capitol, there's a looming debt ceiling deadline. To get into this and much more is the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee and the author of the new book, Do What You Said You Would Do, Fighting for Freedom in the Swamp. Please welcome Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan to the program. Congressman, thanks for being here. But before we get into the book, I need your thoughts on a few of these issues. A federal judge in Georgia blocked President Biden's vaccine mandate for federal contractors this week. Here's what White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki had to say. Watch.
We are confident in our ability legally to make these happen across the country. The Department of Justice will vigorously defend this in court, but we know it works. That's why the president and the administration will continue pressing forward.
Congressman, how much more pressing can this administration do exactly?
Yeah, well, I mean, she said she's confident. They've lost just about every court action, every decision that's happened on this issue. I mean, they lost in the Fifth Circuit. I think there's a good chance they lose in the Sixth Circuit, where they're combining some of these. They've lost on the contractor issue. They've lost on the over 100 employees. So they can keep saying they're confident, just like Secretary Mayorkas said, the border is secure. Oh, okay, great. Yeah, we don't see. Just like Joe Biden said, if you spend more money, if you spend $2 trillion more money, it'll help inflation. Oh, right, really? So no one believes what these folks say. The good news is freedom seems to be winning in the courts, which we always thought was going to happen. Let's hope we continue to get these decisions and freedom prevails.
As a federal judge tossed out Biden's mandate, as you mentioned, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio issued a mandate, the first of its kind in the nation. Private sector employees have to be vaccinated by December 27th. He called it a preemptive strike. Is that legal? I know a judge just halted his mandate for city workers.
I don't think it is, but it's certainly crazy. I mean, you think what I said this the other day, the American people want safe cities, affordable gas, and freedom. Instead, we get record crime, record inflation, and Dr. Fauci. I mean, so this is more Fauciism or whatever you want to call it, but it's more of an encroachment on our First Amendment liberties, our privacy rights, and everything else. So again, if you want more people from New York to continue to move to Florida, Mayor de Blasio, I guess you keep doing crazy things like this. We all know the virus is serious. We have certainly treated it that way over the last 20-some months. Everyone understands that, but we also respect the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, and this thing called freedom. So, look, we'll see how it shakes out. But I think the courts are going to prevail in the right freedom direction.
Congressman, the perplexing thing is we're learning that it seems this Omicron variant that was so ballyhooed is actually not as deadly as the Delta variant. Why the doubling down on these mandates and triple boosters, now 4 boosters, Pfizer is saying? I mean, where does this end?
Yeah, I mean, especially in light of, if mask mandates and lockdowns work, why don't they work? I mean, we've done that. That's all we've done for 20-some months, particularly in Democrat-run jurisdictions. So, yeah, I don't see the common sense. I think the American people are way past it. What was it? Last Saturday it was the biggest day in college football. All the conferences, championship games, game after game after game was on TV, and I didn't see one mask anywhere in packed stadiums all across our great country. But somehow the left, who now controls the Democrat Party and Democrat elected officials, keep wanting to go to the same old playbook: mask mandates and lockdowns. Again, if they work, why don't they work? So this makes no sense. The courts see it for what it is. The American people see it for what it is. Unfortunately, the Democrats don't. But I think the American people are getting ready to give them a rude awakening in the midterm elections next November.
Congressman, the House recently passed a bill for a COVID vaccine database. Now, you voted no, but 80 House Republicans voted yes, including Representative Dan Crenshaw, who's calling critics of the vote, quote, liars and grifters. Your reaction, and why did you vote against it?
Well, I'm just concerned in light of all we just talked about. Do we really need this kind of coordination with state databases? So the folks who voted for it say, well, it's not really a central database, but there's this coordination. Right. Do we really need in the world of Fauci? So I think there were many of us we're kind of reluctant to go there. I'm not going to criticize my colleagues who voted a different way. I think they're wrong. I think the position we took was right. I think what we see from the left, as we've talked about, is so ridiculous. So I'm just in a world of Dr. Fauci, who never put his name on a ballot, has never ran for office, but seems to be the most powerful guy in the executive branch of our government. I was just reluctant to go there. And so we voted no, and so did so many others. And we got to continue to push back against this ever-growing bureaucracy where they have more ability to figure out what we're doing, watch what we're doing, coming after us if they don't like it, like what the stinking Justice Department is doing right now, going after moms and dads who are simply standing up for their kids' education. So that was my overall concern.
Yeah, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments this week in a case that may test the limits of religious freedom. Carson versus Mackin is a challenge to a program in Maine that pays some students to attend private schools, but excludes schools that provide religious instruction. Your thoughts on the case quickly, and the Biden working group, Congressman, on expanding the court. They finally issued their recommendations. They decided and announced that they were undecided.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that's because everyone knows you shouldn't expand the court. To your last point, shouldn't expand the court. But because of the radical left and the Democrat Party, as I said, that controls the party, they want to do all kinds of ridiculous things, like add 4 justices. I always think it's interesting. Why 4? Well, because that would give them a majority on the court. Why not 1, 2, 3, or 10? No, just 4, because that gives them a majority. Everyone knows that's ridiculous, changing the rules midway. Let's hope that doesn't happen. On the issue of education, I'm to the point where I don't think Americans should vote for any candidate, Republican or Democrat. Don't vote for any candidate who's not for school choice, who's not for empowering parents, moms and dads, and saying to parents, you know best what for your children's education. You know what's best for your kids' education. You should be in control where you want them to go, and the money should follow the student to a religious school, to a non-religious school, whatever school you think best suits your kids' needs and will help them get the education they need to achieve the American dream.
Congressman, you mentioned it earlier. We've heard the stories about a possible federal crackdown on parents who demand answers and input into their kids' learning. In your capacity as a ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, I know you wanted a subpoena issued to the National School Boards Association demanding answers about the Biden administration's attempt to target parents who simply want those answers. What do you hope to find out, and what actions can the committee take to protect these parents if that becomes necessary?
Well, Raymond, we tried to issue a subpoena. Understand, we can't. Only the Democrats can. They're in power. We tried to bring it up as an agenda item in the committee hearing, saying, call this up. They wouldn't allow us to call it up because we want those documents of communication between the School Board Association and the Biden administration. Understand this. September 29th, a letter goes to Joe Biden saying, go after parents, use the Patriot Act, treat them as domestic terrorists. 2 days later, the lady who wrote that letter, Viola Garcia, gets a plum assignment at the Department of Education on this board. 3 days after that letter was sent, you already have Tim Langen, Director of Counterterrorism at the FBI, talking with the Justice Department on how to implement the letter that was just sent 4 days earlier. 5 days after the letter is sent, October 4th, Merrick Garland actually does a memo which implements everything the School Board Association asked the Biden administration to do. All that happens in 5 days. Now, ask yourself a question, Raymond. You've watched Washington before. When have you ever seen the federal government move that fast? Which tells me one important thing, scary thing, actually. This thing really didn't start with the School Boards Association. It didn't go this direction. It went this direction. The government was looking for a pretext to go after moms and dads who were standing up, speaking out against this curriculum. And they wanted the letter as the pretext, much like the Comey FBI used the dossier as the pretext to go after President Trump's campaign and spy on them. That is the scariest thing I've seen in this town, where you get some reason, some excuse to do what you want to do, which is to go after your political opponents. That's why we want the information. That's why we want to dig into this issue and stop the Justice Department from doing what we know they're now doing based on what a whistleblower has told us.
Speaking of targeting political opponents, I want to talk to you briefly, and you address this in your new book. This entire January 6th Select Committee, it's now probing into various aspects of the people who were there, who wasn't there. They issued a subpoena against Mark Meadows, whom you know well. Meadows is saying, no, I have to preserve executive privilege here, and he's not cooperating. In fact, he's suing Nancy Pelosi. Here's my question. Didn't the FBI already do an investigation of January 6th and determine there was no coordination, or did I misread that?
No, you're exactly right. And that is God bless you, that's the fundamental point. But this committee doesn't care because it's political. Democrats have nothing else to talk about. They can't talk about the border. They can't talk about inflation. They can't talk about crime. They can't talk about the Afghanistan exit. They can't talk about anything except this, because everything else has been a disaster. Look, there are three people who have just the executive privilege with the president, the three top people, the National Security Director, the White House counsel, and the chief of staff. And I would argue of those three, the chief of staff is the one closest to the president. And this executive privilege precedent, which has been a part of our country for 200 plus years, the Democrats are going to just eviscerate it. And this is wrong where they're going. But frankly, as I've said many times, if they're going to cross this bridge, if they're going to go there, if it's good for one side, it is good for the other. I don't think we should. I hope we don't. But if they do, and understand, Mark was willing to talk to them. He said, I'll answer questions that aren't part of that executive privilege that exists with those top three people in the White House working for a president. And they said, no, you're going to have to answer every single question we ask, regardless of whether it encroaches on executive privilege. And Mark said, I just can't do that. That violates the fundamental principles of our great country.
Yeah, we'll see where this goes. Tensions are escalating, as you know, between Russia and Ukraine. Russian troops have moved along their border there. President Biden and Putin held a 2-hour video call earlier this week. It started this way, Congressman.
Hello.
Добрый день.
Good to see you again.
What do you make of that intro, and what should be the U.S. response to address Russia's posture with Ukraine? Sanctions only, or something more here?
Well, I think the big takeaway in all this is when you project weakness from the Oval Office, bad people around the planet do bad things. And we saw this months ago. I point to this example all the time because it was so telling to me. When Secretary of State Blinken was in Anchorage meeting with his Chinese counterpart, and our side is on one side of the table and the Chinese counterpart's on the other side, and the dress down, the lecture that the Secretary of State of the United States received from China, calling us racist and everything else, there is no way, Raymond, there is no way that would happen to Mike Pompeo in a President Trump administration. It just wouldn't, because President Trump projects strength. And he actually gave, in Ukraine example, he gave them Javelin missiles when Obama was giving them MREs and blankets.
Before we run out of time, I want to talk about your latest book, Do What You Said You Do. You write that your biggest regret was not repealing the Affordable Care Act when Republicans had control of the House, the Senate, and the White House.
Yeah.
Why didn't that happen? And what will Republicans do should they regain control of the House and possibly the Senate? You know, everybody says, oh, Republicans are going to win. The question is, what would you do if you win?
Yeah, no, great point. Well, when we win I think we're going to win in 11 months. I think we will be back in power in January of 2023. Joe Biden will still be the president, so it's going to be tough to pass legislation. But we're going to have to hold the appropriators responsible, to account, and make sure that we don't fund the crazy things that the Democrats want to fund, and we fight for a couple key specific policies in those appropriation bills. That will be our only leverage. But the main thing we can do when we win back power is to do the oversight that the Constitution requires us to do. To what we write about and what I wrote about in the book on that specific chapter, we should have on January 20th, 2017, passed the legislation that we had passed in the previous Congress. Instead, Paul Ryan had this 3-bucket plan, which was ridiculous. We should have focused on passing what we had already done, that the American people sent us here to do, pass that, and then moved right into cutting taxes. Instead, he introduced this crazy plan that we knew was the wrong plan, that wasn't really going to bring down premiums, and we went into this long fight. I detail that issue in the book and a host of other stories that I think will take your viewers behind the scenes and give them a real sense of how Congress operates in some of those key fights.
It's an ugly sight, I have to say, Congressman, seeing the machinations and the way this stuff moves, you know, and again, Paul Ryan had those 3 buckets. The voters kicked all of those buckets over, I'm afraid. Before we run out of time, the 49-year-old man arrested for setting Fox's tree in New York afire in Manhattan has already been released on bail. He claims he didn't do it. This was clearly an act of public vandalism, potentially very dangerous. Your thoughts? And we're seeing a rash of these things. In D.C., there's a statue of the Virgin Mary. Her nose was knocked off. Her hand was taken off right on the university, Catholic University grounds. What's happening here?
Democrats have legitimized criminal behavior. I mean, when you defund the police, you shouldn't be surprised when you get more crime. When you say we're going to get rid of bail and you get rid of bail, you shouldn't be surprised when you get more crime. When you spend an entire summer, as Democrats did in 2020, saying that rioters and looters are actually peaceful protesters, you shouldn't be surprised when you get more crime. So the only answer is to elect Republicans, elect conservatives who are going to stand up for the rule of law and stand up for common sense, for goodness sake. So this is what happens when the left gets control. And I spend a time on this in the book, where we talk about the radical left and how they're different today than the true liberals of just a decade ago who believed in the First Amendment, who believed in the Constitution. Today's left, the biggest concern I have is today's left doesn't believe in the First Amendment free speech rights that we have. They don't. They say, if you don't agree with me, you're not allowed to talk. And if you try, Raymond, they're going to call you a racist and try to cancel you. That is frightening. So this is today's left. And when you have that mindset out there, you get what we're now seeing in our streets. It's frightening, but the only remedy is to elect people who will do what they say they would do and get here and fight for the things the American people truly believe in and make our country a special place.
Congressman Jim Jordan, I thank you for being here, and the Congressman's book, Do What You Said You'd Do, Fighting for Freedom in the Swamp, is available at bookstores everywhere. Thanks again.
Thank you.